All right, welcome back to another video from Cyrusher Tech. Today we're going to be going over quickly how to install the front wheel on the solid axles for the XF650 and or Kommoda bicycles. You may notice I'm in a different location today. That's because I'm in our storefront that just opened in northern Utah. So if you're located anywhere near and would like to come test ride and look at these bikes in person, come check them out. So Cyrusher recently updated their axles on the XF650. They used to have a quick release and now they use a solid axle with two end nuts on the end. So this video is just dedicated to show how you install that on your bike. So for today's video, we're only gonna need one required tool and then another tool I find very helpful. The first tool, one that we'll need is a 15mm end wrench. This should be included in your toolkit that comes with the bike in the box. I personally like installing the front wheel with the bike upside down and the forks facing up. That way you can ensure the wheel is pushed onto the fork all the way, and gravity kind of helps you do that. So when you do that, you need to make sure that your handlebars are off the ground because the computer can get damaged or broken if you don't elevate the handlebars. So what I've made here is just a small little tool. It's just a cardboard strip with some foam blocks there that just elevate the handlebars off the ground just a little bit. So anything, you can use wood blocks, you can use foam blocks if you have them, just something to keep the handlebars off the ground. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. So as you can see, I've got this bike put on my little homemade stand here. And its purpose is to just create distance so the computer cannot get smashed or broken. So I recommend doing this if you're gonna put the front wheel on with the bike upside down. This is what the wheel looks like when you pull it out of the box. And I'll scoot in here so you can see. On the brake rotor side, you have just the axle here. And then on the other side, so I'll come over here, you have a nut. So this is a spacer nut. It stays on there. So the wheel, as it comes out of the box, is ready to go. Don't touch the axle. It's ready to be installed. Here is a close-up of the opposite side of the brake rotor. You have that spacer nut here, and then the axle. And then if we go back to the other side here, if we focus it up, you can see it's just the axle. Here we have a washer and what we call an end nut or an acorn nut or just a normal nut. Essentially, these are what holds your wheel onto those fork legs back there on the bike. So putting on your front wheel, make sure that the brake rotor or the brake disc goes in between those brake pads. And then, as you can see here, there's the slot and the fork, and that axle just sits right down in there. And the reason I like to put the wheel on upside down with the bike is so gravity can help me push this wheel so it sits all the way down in here. It's very important that you push that down so that your axle is seated all the way. The easiest way to check if your axle is seated all the way is to simply look at the axle and see if it's pushed all the way down in the fork. Sometimes, especially if you're putting the wheel on with the bike right side up, the wheel cannot go in there all the way and it won't be seated. So you can get something like this. That's when wheels usually fall out and or come apart. So when you're putting it on, I'll kind of show it here again. Make sure that your brake rotor's all lined up in those brake pads. And then you're just gonna wanna slide it down and push it down there. Sometimes I often just kind of grab the top of the tire and push down to make sure it's just seated in there all the way. So here we have one of our washers and acorn nuts is what we'll call them. And the washer goes on the outside of the axle. So washer on first and then put your nut on. And then I would just tighten these by your hands, finger tight them for now. We'll move to the other side. Okay, we've got our other acorn nut and washer. So we'll do the same process. We'll go washer first, and then we will put our acorn nut on and tighten it by our hand. One of the most important things that we need to do is to evenly tighten these acorn nuts down. And that's why we do it by hand first. So now we can go in with our end wrench and tighten them tighter. So the final step from here is to take our end wrench, our 15mm end wrench, and tighten those two acorn nuts to secure that wheel on the axle and the forks. As far as how tight you want that, you want the nuts tight enough to where the wheel's not gonna fall off when you're riding, but you don't want it so tight that it's gonna prohibit the wheel from spinning in those forks. So I prefer the circle end of the end wrench. You can get more surface area on the nut and you have a lesser chance of stripping it out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna try and evenly tighten both sides here. So I'll tighten this side until it's a little tighter, and I'll go over to the other side and tighten this one. You can see that. And then I'll come back to this side. I'll tighten this side a little bit. And I'll tighten this other side again. So now I can feel that these nuts are getting tighter, and they're not snug yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna give them one final tight turn to make them snug. So I'll do that now. Okay, that one is tight. Tight. So I've tightened the acorn nuts on here, so they're tight enough that I don't think the wheel will fall off. One way to check that, you could try and simply grab the fork and pull the wheel out. As you can see, this wheel's not going anywhere, so I've got those nuts tight enough. And then if I spin the wheel around here, she's spinning really good. No resistance here. It's spinning for, we're on maybe 10 seconds now, so that's a good indicator to show that we've got it on the right tightness. That concludes our video to put on the front wheel and tighten those axle nuts there. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and letting us know what content you would like to see for general maintenance tips or creative videos or things you'd like to see for Cyrusher e-bikes, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.